Hello, everyone, and today I'm going to be talking about my ideas for a possible new historical Total War title with a totally new setting that really hasn't been touched by Total War in the past, because there are many settings that I think could definitely work for a historical Total War and be marketable and sell. And I think one of those is definitely the ancient Near East Total War. So, of course, I have a mod running here. This is Bronze Age Total War for Rome Total War. I have a review of that up on the channel. You can see it up in the top right corner. Now, Bronze Age Total War is a good mod. It has interesting battle mechanics. It has interesting campaigns. It not only has a grand campaign that starts in 1290 BC with a lot of playable factions like the Amorites, Elamites, Phoenicians, Assyrians, and Babylonians, but it also has a few provincial campaigns, including the Sea People invasion, the Dorian invasion, and a few others that are quite nice to see. So let's start a campaign here before I start talking further. So let's go for the Mitanni, and we'll talk a little bit about the potential that this setting has for a potential ancient Near East Total War. And of course, with the release, or I should say the re-release of Total War Troy on Steam, CA, the Creative Assembly, actually released a trailer for the new historical mode for the Total War Troy historical campaign on YouTube. They released a trailer for that new mode. And in that trailer, they said this mode makes it a Bronze Age Total War. And I think the Creative Assembly knows that this setting could be popular, it can sell. So here I'm going to advocate for a real Ancient Near East Total War, an official one by the Creative Assembly. So I think a Bronze Age campaign could be one of the main campaigns, one of the era campaigns. I think it definitely should have eras, just like the original medieval Total War. I think this Ancient Near East Total War needs to have era campaigns. And I think there should be era campaigns included in the base game, right? So, and the map should definitely stretch as far as the one here in Bronze Age Total War. So all the way from part of the Balkans and Greece, through Asia Minor and the Caucasus, all the way to eastern Iran, the coast of Arabia. So the mod crashed here, but I'm going to keep talking. And this Bronze Age campaign with a 1290 start date is of course great because there are a lot of major marketable factions here that definitely should be playable. So I'll go forward with the marketable ones first. So you have the Kingdom of Babylon, the Kassite Kingdom of Babylon, the Middle Babylonian period, based at Dur-Kudigalzu. And that would be quite a lovely campaign. I think definitely Babylonia is a marketable faction for sure. Who doesn't know about the Babylonians? Additionally, you've got the Middle Assyrian Kingdom, which has just sort of thrown the shackles off. It was controlled mostly by Mitanni, of course, for a while. And then you've got the Assyrian Kingdom here. That's kind of growing in power and size, and it's going to threaten its southern, western, and northern, and all of its neighbors, essentially. Another marketable kingdom, of course, is going to be the Hittite Empire. A lot of people really like the Hittites. It's a favorite of a lot of people, and I think having them here at the height of their powers, it's going to be something a faction a lot of people would like to play and see. And of course, the last super marketable faction, or not the last one, but one of the big ones is going to be Egypt, New Kingdom Egypt. Everyone loves the New Kingdom Egyptians in original Rome Total War and the Rome Remastered, so I'm sure they'll love to see the New Kingdom Egyptians actually in the correct time period. And additionally, you've got Troy, Hittite Wilusha, and then, of course, the Mycenaean Greeks as well to round it out. And those would be the major marketable factions. Of course, there would have to be other playable factions as well, like the Sea Peoples, who would come in as a horde. And I think the Sea Peoples should be sort of semi-random in how they come about and where they strike. right? And that would really add to the replayability of the campaign and add to the sort of real horror that the civilizations experienced as the Sea Peoples ravaged everything from, destroying all the Mycenaean Greek sites to taking down, at least partially, the Hittite Empire, to utterly destroying Ugarit, to really challenging Egypt in a couple of major battles in the Nile Delta. So I think that would be super cool to see a Sea People invasion campaign. And of course, there would be other major factions as well. The Mitanni have to be playable. Mitanni, a very interesting kingdom with which, despite having a Hurrian population, mostly, the upper class was, or the Mitanni people themselves, were actually Indo-European speakers. Very interesting kingdom. Would definitely like to see them, and their capital, Washukani. Additionally, the Nairi should be playable. The Nairi, a sort of confederation of mostly Hurrian statelets based around Lake Van and areas to the west of Lake Van, part of the Armenian highland. And of course, Elam, everyone's favorite faction, would have to be playable as well. Elamites, some of my favorite, one of my favorite kingdoms for sure. Okay, another campaign we'd have to have, another era campaign would have to be going way back to the 25th century BC. I want to see Sumerian warring states. So this campaign would be based on a blown up map of Mesopotamia, all the way up to part of Syria, and Mari and Ebla, and Carchemish up here. And this campaign would have several major factions. This would be sort of the warring Sumerian states themselves. This would have Uruk, Ur as factions, Umma, Lagash. Of course, the famous Umma and Lagash border war occurred in this period, 25th, 24th centuries BC. We have a lot of information about that. Additionally, there would be other city-states playable as well, like Kish, Akkad, Mari, Ebla, Elam, and Adab as well. So that would be very cool to see. Additionally, there should definitely be an Iron Age campaign. So this would be the era of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which is a very marketable faction, of course, due to its being featured heavily in a lot of books in the Old Testament. The Neo-Assyrian Empire and kings like Sennacherib, Tukulti, Ninurta, very famous from the roles they play in the Old Testament. So very marketable faction, I think, the Neo-Assyrian Empire. And of course, they would control pretty much most of Mesopotamia and most of Syria and parts of Iran. And they would be threatening to invade Egypt. Of course, they did control Egypt for a short period. So the major faction, this campaign would start in 800 BC, and the factions would be Neo-Assyria, and then Urartu, the greatest rival for the Neo-Assyrians, again, the upper class was Hurrian in the kingdom of Urartu, but there were many different types of people living there, including perhaps some Armenian-speaking people. And that would be another major faction here, based around Lake Van and up to Lake Sevan and Lake Urmia as well. Of course, at its height, it controlled parts of northern Iran, territories west of Lake Van, and then perhaps even some alliances, some states all the way down to the coast of Kilikia here. Additionally, you would have Egypt here, not the powerful New Kingdom Egypt of the Bronze Age campaign, but this would be a sort of late Egypt. And I would definitely like to see their portrayal here, not as powerful as they used to be, but they are ready to stand against the Assyrians, that's for sure. And of course, the Elamites, constant thorn in the side of the Assyrians, constantly encouraging rebellion in Babylon against Assyrian rule, It would be great to see a playable Elam here in this era. So Elam would essentially be playable in every single era, which is very nice to see. And then you'd have the Median tribes sort of gathering in the Zagros Mountains. Of course, they played a major role in the downfall of the Assyrians in the 8th, 7th centuries BC. And it would be good to see the kingdom of Phrygia here in Asia Minor. And of course, the Cimmerian invasion would be a very important aspect of this Iron Age campaign. The Cimmerian and Scythian invasions played a major role in the downfall of several kingdoms, including Phrygia. The Cimmerians really damaged Urartu and the Scythians as well. And of course, a lot of people co-opted the Scythians to fight in their armies too. So that would be nice to see. And again, that campaign would start around 800 BC. I think that would be very cool to see, a very marketable campaign. And of course, I would like to see some DLC campaigns, right? So campaigns that I think are necessary for such a game, but perhaps it would be a bit much to include them in the base game. And perhaps they could be part of patches like free LC. Some of them could be DLC for whoever is interested in purchasing those campaigns. So the first one I would like to see would be the Rise of Sargon. Sargon of Akkad, of course, very marketable figure, very popular. I think a lot of people know, or at least aware of Sargon and his empire, perhaps arguably the first empire ever in the world. So the playable factions, this would start around 2370 BC, of course, or perhaps 2375, whichever you prefer. And the playable factions would be the Kingdom of Lagash, led by Urukagina, one of my favorite Mesopotamian kings. Again, this channel I might have named Urukagina Total War if his name wasn't so difficult, so I went with Gudea of Lagash instead. The other major faction here in southern Mesopotamia would be the Kingdom of Uruk, led by Lugal-Zaghesi. So he would control most of Mesopotamia here, all the way up to perhaps even Kish. And then you would have Akkad up here. We don't actually know for certain where Akkad is. It's somewhere over here, perhaps in the Diyala River Valley. And of course, this would be a sort of narrative campaign where Sargon goes down, takes out Lugal-Zaghesi's kingdom, and then takes all of Mesopotamia, washes his weapons, as he says in his own inscriptions, in the Persian Gulf, and then he'll move up and have to fight the other major factions included here, which would be Mari and Ebla in Syria. So that would be a very cool, very atmospheric campaign, I think, Rise of Sargon. Another campaign that would be very marketable is the Rise of Hammurabi. Who doesn't know about the Code of Hammurabi? Who doesn't learn about that in school? Everyone knows about Hammurabi. And seeing his rise to power against his opponents in a campaign starting in 1800 BC, that would be very cool. So you'd have the Old Babylonian Kingdom playable. You'd have the Kingdom of Larsa playable under Rimsin. You would have the Sealand playable. Again, a mysterious sort of pseudo-Sumerian successor state in the swamps to the south. You'd have Elam playable because Elam is always playable. You'd have the Assyrian Kingdom, which was the old Assyrian Kingdom, quite powerful, another Amorite dynasty just like Hammurabi's. You'd have Eshnunna, the Kingdom of Eshnunna, somewhere around here. Yeah, here it is. You would have, like I said, Kingdom of Larsa, and then Kingdom of Mari under Zimri Lim. So this would be a very cool campaign because it would, again, be, I think it could be done, again, on the campaign map of the Sumerian Warring States period, because Hammurabi didn't really interact with the Egyptians. So Hammurabi was actually allied to Zimri Lim and Mari at the beginning of his reign, and then he took down all his opponents in Mesopotamia. And then, of course, he went against his ally, Zimri Lim of Mari, and really, really destroyed Mari utterly in a siege. That's why we have the burnt out palace of Zimri-Lim, which contains a nice library from which we have many letters and texts. Very important. And of course, the last campaign that I think could be included would be the Rise of Persia campaign. We'd have playable Persia under Cyrus the Great, and the Median Empire, northern Iran, and then the Neo-Babylonians in Mesopotamia, and then Egypt. Of course, weak pharaohs at this time, but definitely major players. And then Armenia, and then Lydia, another really major player in that period. Start date about 559 BC. I think that would be a very marketable campaign, and of course you would have Greek city-states as well. People really like Cyrus the Great, very marketable figure. Perhaps even a Behistun campaign would be possible with such a campaign map and scenario, with a Rise of Darius the Great campaign. I think that would be very marketable. A lot of people really like the Achaemenids, and I think a lot of people would purchase such a DLC if it wasn't included in the base game. And of course, for a lot of people, historical battles are an important part, an integral part of the Total War experience. So here is a list of battles that could be included. The Battle of Kadesh, between the Egyptian Empire at the height of its powers under Ramses II and the Hittites at the height of their powers under Muwatalli. That would be a must for any ancient Near East Total War. Huge chariot battle, huge infantry battle. It would be very nice to see. Of course, this battle ended inconclusively, with both sides really claiming victory. Another battle I would like to see would be the Battle of Sumer, the battle between the Sumerians under Utuchengal and the invading Gutian. Barbarian hillmen. So, of course, the Gutians overran Sumer near the end of the Sargonic period in the 22nd century BC, and it was up to Utuchengal of Uruk to drive them out and save his people. And there are a lot of very overdramatic Sumerian texts about this battle. I would really like to see it. Additionally, I would like to see the Siege of Mari. I just described what happened. So basically, Hammurabi was allied to Mari's king, Zimri-Lim, for a long time. And now that the king of Babylon had swept away his other foes, it was time to turn on his allies. Can Zimri-Lim hold them off? Let's find out. Another battle would be the Siege of Ugarit. So that would pit the sea peoples against the citizens of Ugarit. And this was a major battle, again resulted historically in the complete destruction of the city. I would like to see a player have a chance at saving Ugarit. And of course the Battle of the Nile would be very important as well. Egypt, Pharaoh Ramses III versus the enemies of civilization itself. Ramses III has mustered absolutely everything he possibly can to stop these destructive sea peoples. Can Egypt save civilization and fight off the sea peoples? Battle of the Nile, let's do it. Another battle I would like to see would be the Siege of Lachish. Again, this battle, we know it from the Old Testament, and we also know it from Neo-Assyrian sources. Sennacherib mentions it. It's depicted actually on the wall of one of the Assyrian palaces. It was a clash between the Neo-Assyrian Empire and the Kingdom of Judah, and the fate of Lachish was at stake. Will the king Sennacherib be able to capture the town, or will the Kingdom of Judah be able to resist? It's up to you, the player. Additionally, I would like to see the Battle of Opis. The Battle of Opis was, of course, the major battle between Cyrus the Great and the Neo-Babylonian Empire under King Nabonidus. So, will Cyrus the Great be able to save Babylonia from the clutches of its possibly heretic king? Historically, of course, he did, and he advertised it as such. And, of course, the Piece de Resistance, Siege of Nineveh, the complete destruction of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. one of the most bloody and savage sieges in ancient Near Eastern history, with literally everyone taking revenge on the Assyrians for their brutality in the 8th and 7th centuries BC. Here we have a matchup between the Babylonians, Medes, and Urartians against the Neo-Assyrians defending their legendary capital. Can you complete the destruction of the Neo-Assyrian Empire? So, that's pretty much everything I have to say about the Ancient Near East Total War. Does anyone else agree that we need a Total War game based on the Ancient Near East? I just gave a ton of super marketable ideas. I think this would be an amazing era to see campaigns in and battles in. Very atmospheric, very cool, very mysterious. I think it would be great as the next brand spanking new historical Total War title that everyone wants to see, and the Creative Assembly knows it. So, if you enjoy the historical Total Wars and their mods, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. If you'd like to support the channel, there are links in the description below where you can do so. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.